Good afternoon, everyone. We'll call to order the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals regular meeting for December 19th, 2024. First item on our agenda is a determination of a quorum, and with 4 members, 5-member board, we do have a quorum today. Next item is public comments. Has anyone reached out wishing to speak before the meeting gets started?
Chair Young, we haven't had anyone reach out.
Okay. Next item is a consideration of the minutes from our regular meeting from November 26, 2024. Those minutes were provided to the board members. Are there any changes necessary to those?
No.
If not, those will stand approved as written. And next, we'll move to new business. We have a special use permit request. Application Z24045 by Mr. Matt Taylor of SEC, representing Providence Christian Academy. They're requesting a special use permit in order to expand an existing institutional group assembly use, in this case a private school, in a single-family residential RS-15 zone. This is for property located at 378 and 410 DeJarnett Lane. An approximately 13,552 square foot pre-K and K building, playground, and additional parking lot is proposed. Ms. Smith, if you'd review this application for us.
Thank you so much, Chair. You may not normally see me at this meeting. I'm Holly Smith. I'm one of your principal planners working on this particular project. As was mentioned, this is up on DeJarnett. There is an existing school campus, and that school campus has had several BZA applications over the years, and the current application, going to the aerial map, here I've showed 3 areas that are bubbled in red up towards the front of the property. So it now involves a new parcel that has been purchased by the campus. This area here that currently has some of your detention areas, up this area, they're looking at a new entry coming into the site one way. Their existing playground structure is here that they are looking at putting in a different location, and then to the south section adding a new parking area. So they have provided a nice, what I'll say, colorful map that's a little bit easier to follow. Here we go. That you can see the existing campus in the aerial beneath, which serves currently 1st through 12th grade. The new addition that they're looking at is here predominantly up in the front section, which is just under 13,550 square feet of space for both pre-K and K students. That particular use is looking at adding about 114 total students and pre-Kers to the campus, and also changing the circulation route for the property. Currently, this area here is where most of the persons traverse through the property, and there are 2 crossing guards on site in the mornings that serve those sites, and now they're looking at where the current house is, demolishing that building, having 2 inbound one-way lanes. Instead of a full access at this point, it would circulate through the site, have a separate drop-off area for the new pre-K building, and then of course if they're dropping off for any other students, they could come through this other portions of the existing campus. But here at the middle portion, it would be outbound only, and then at the far side, it would stay the circulation patterns would be the same as they are today, which is full left in, left out, right in, right out circulation. Part of this particular process, they are looking at the existing detention basin is in this area, so they are looking at relocating that structure playground into this area, and where the structure is today is where these kind of right next to the inbound lanes of the campus. And they are looking at adding a proposed parking lot as well to the back of the project, and then adding a landscape buffer, a 12-foot wide type C with a fence along this portion to the south along the parking lot, as well as this portion along the front. This is a typo, it's not 10 feet, but 12 feet as well here along this side. And then there are existing buffers that were planted here when this particular parking lot was added on by, where here they talk about wanting to supplement it with canopy trees. We'll talk about a condition that staff is proposed to add to that, and then you'll also see a 12-foot landscape buffer that they're proposing within their own campus between the playground area and the drive areas. A neighborhood meeting was held for this particular project. About 16 persons had attended. The input that was provided was really in a couple of different areas, and we also received some emails in writing with some pictures that I believe there are some residents that want to speak today on those particular items. But the main things that they brought up is currently there is a drainage basin here, and there is a variable drainage easement along the property. So when the adjacent subdivision actually came through, there was a very large variable drainage easement that was provided, but there's not any like pipes in the ground that are part of those facilities. At this phase, we usually don't see a detailed site plan with drainage calculations and those specifics, but any kind of site plan review that gets approved by, should this body approve the application being submitted for today, they would have to meet all the city standards, and basically drainage patterns, how they come from other properties would have to continue, so they can't just block it up. And as you'll see in the end, we're actually would require a mandatory referral, which we have a very specific process that goes through both Planning Commission and the City Council, and those are public hearings, and they must demonstrate that they have an adequate replacement facilities and solutions for those drainage patterns. So that was one of the issues. The second one that they brought up was traffic. We did get a traffic analysis for this project as well as some future expansions across the street, but there was not a warrant analysis that was included. So staff has asked for a warrant analysis prior to them getting a site plan review coming through the door, really to discuss when would signalization of Alexander and DeJarnette be appropriate. We don't know if it's with this project, but obviously DeJarnette is now 5 lanes. A lot of the traffic is city traffic, and so a full warrant analysis, I think there's like 8 or 10 specific criteria that have to be met to be able to put a signal in place, and so that is one of the conditions that we have put in your staff report. Neighbors were also talking about fencing and landscaping, that they can maybe include a little bit more of a varietal for maple, oak, and cedar trees. Most of the trees that are in buffer areas are all evergreens, and I guess in the past they had some of these more colorful trees that they'd like to see implemented, and the applicant was more than happy to accommodate those needs. As to parking, if you look at page 3 of your staff report, the parking that's required for this new use as well as the existing uses on the campus is 223 spaces. Currently, there are 385 spaces on the site, so they are looking at providing this new parking lot in this southerly section directly adjacent to the gym and high school building. And with that additional parking, we're looking at 538 spaces being on campus, which is, I don't know, probably close to 250% of what is actually required. So it does meet the parking requirements and have quite a bit of a surplus. When we're looking at the landscaping portion, we did talk to the applicant, and one of the comments was wanting to take a look at the grades of when buffer landscaping does go in, that those are adjacent grade measured. So as an example, there's some areas here where the slope goes down towards a water feature. Not sure how that feature will look after they're done with the grading plans for the project, but we would like to modify the conditions slightly to state that the buffer and privacy fence be based on the adjacent grade of improvements. So that just means that if you've got a slope next to your buffer area, it's measured from that top of the slope. So if it's a 6-foot privacy fence, it's 6 feet, but if they want to put it down the slope, again, it needs to be as measured from that grade. As to photometrics, that was also brought up. Looking at the photometric plans that were provided, the proposal does meet the city standards, which is 0.5 candle watts at the property line. So they currently have in their proposal some parking lot lights that are in between these tree locations, as well as some here in the main parking structure. And again, when you look at the property line, in most cases they're at 0 or 0.5. Now that doesn't mean you won't see light, you'll still see a light pole, but the way that photometrics are gauged is there's a 35-degree shield that's on that. So basically the light spillover cannot be more than that 0.5 at the adjacent property lines, but you'll still see a pole and a light. It's just not shining or shedding on those. And they've been using dark sky ordinance type lighting, which is much more directed than the old school type of lighting that you might see in some of our older shopping centers and such. And with that, make sure I covered everything. So the last page of the application states that there are 5 suggested staff recommendations for conditions that I briefly touched upon, and I'll read them into the record. First and foremost, that a signal warrant analysis of DeJarnette and Alexander Boulevard be submitted by the applicant prior to a pre-application meeting for the site plan. So that basically is, we have the information before they finalize their site plan layout, so we know if it has any impact to modify any of those. Second, that a mandatory referral to abandon the existing drainage easement be submitted concurrently with the site plan and be approved. So they have to get those approvals in order to not have those drainage easements and put these particular facilities on them. Third, that a site plan review be submitted to the planning department for review and approval prior to the issuance of any building permit. And that site plan submittal includes civil plans, landscape plans, photometric lighting, building elevations, and any other plans necessary to demonstrate compliance with our zoning ordinance and our design guidelines. Fourth, that a type C buffer, which is a 12-foot wide buffer with a 6-foot tall privacy fence, be installed along the entire easterly western property line. So the applicant had proposed, and you can see here with this pink line, fencing there, fencing here, and this blue fencing here. And so what this condition means, the staff is suggesting that a privacy fence also be included along this section that is previously planted to a buffer standard, is the suggestion by staff. And as I mentioned earlier, that would be in those areas and it be based on the adjacent grades of the improvements. And lastly, a wetland mitigation must be approved by the state before any land disturbance. So currently there's a very small wetland, let me circle it, right about in this area that is TDAC jurisdiction, so they would need to approve that before city can approve it in any of our plans, or they can disturb any of those soils. And again, those plans usually are not done at this point in time because they're not sure if they are going to get the approval, but those would be required as part of our site plan review process. And with that, this particular item has been noticed as a public hearing to the same radius that was done for the neighborhood meeting. I believe it was 500 feet radius went out for this particular project site, and we do have potentially a couple of folks that would like to speak on it, and I'll just go ahead and put the combined comments on the screen, so when whoever needs to go to that section, we can scroll to that particular photo section. So if there's any other questions for staff or Mr. Donovan or the applicant is here along with their engineering team, can go over things, and I'm sure I missed quite a bit else, or Chris, are here for questions, answers, those sorts of things as well.
All right. Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Smith or staff at this point?
Holly, what are the height of the fences that they're proposing?
6 foot.
Okay.
And what is the, I'm sorry, what is the current buffer? What's the current buffer requirement on the, I think it was in the previous picture, just past the pink line, that will, there you go.
This one here?
Yep, that one there.
This one, I want to say, and I may have to confirm with their landscape architect, it looks like a C buffer currently, because it looks like 2 rows of evergreen trees and then a row of shrubbery. So that's a type C buffer, but it currently has no fencing in that particular area.
Okay.
And C buffers don't necessarily have to require fencing. Fencing in our zoning code, usually if a fence is put up, usually can reduce your landscaping by 50%. Some cases, when we've seen planned developments, you'll see a buffer with a fencing where they think it's appropriate. In other cases, you'll see a fence and half the landscaping. But a type C buffer would be the appropriate buffer for this particular type of use.
And related to the grade, you said that when they take out the current detention area, that they're going to be left with a different grade. Is there currently a berm on that border between the existing homes?
Well, and I did notice on this, and I was talking to the applicant slightly before, is it looks like there is a berm proposed along this area, adjacent to the school section, but currently there is not any berms along this whole section, so the grade, literally cross-section looks like this. So you've got a house, horrible crude drawing, and then you have your parking lot.
So it's more of
lights.
is it
So-
intentional for drainage, or is it just an existing feature of the property?
So currently, there's a drainage easement over that section, so there is a drainage that is occurring in the central section, and then the drainage pond on top of that has its own drainage system, so it's maybe 8 or 10 feet in depth, and so that would be changed with a new layout that they have not fully determined. I've heard a lot of underground storage, and we do also have Katie Knoll, our engineer, who understands more of that stuff, as well as Aus, that can maybe address it further.
I've got a couple other questions. I want to make sure I understood what you said about the current turn lane, existing right turn lane. Is that going to be inbound and outbound still? That's not
So
changing?
this turn lane here will be outbound only.
Yeah.
So currently you have full traffic movements. This one will be inbound only. And they will also have this decelerization lane that they will add, so it gets clear of the traffic zone as they're coming into the site. And then this one will remain exactly as it
Inbound,
is
outbound.
today. Correct.
What's the length of that turn lane, and typically what TDOT would require?
Is it 150, 200?
Typically, it's between 50 to 100 feet, but it's all driven by the traffic, the TIS, the traffic impact study, and whatever stacking they ask us to. For the taper, we look at the bay taper requirements driven by AASHTO and TDOT.
So what's this one going to be with the new turn lane and then the existing turn lane?
We haven't been into the geometric design yet, but I want to say it's going to be between 150 to 170
Okay.
foot. I would have to do the math, so but it
Okay.
would be in this range.
And question about the wetland. You illustrated here that a new parking lot is going to be entirely covering that wetland area. What's the typical mitigation in a situation like that that TDEC's going to require to be done?
So typically, we go through an ARAP permit, which is aquatic resource alteration permit, to remove this wetland. It depends on the size of the wetland, and it could be a general permit, so the removal will fall under the general permit. If it hits a certain size, then we go through an individual permit, but we'll go through this during site plan review.
I don't think you answered my question.
Okay.
Or maybe I just didn't understand it.
So it's a removal.
You're going to cover up this wetland area. You're going to have to mitigate it by establishing some other area for the wetland, right? Or making some kind of negotiation with the TDEC?
It depends on the size of the wetland.
Okay,
Yeah,
let's say at the minimum level, what would
So
that
the
be?
minimum, if it's less than quarter an acre, then this falls under the general permit, and it can be removed with a general permit with no mitigation. If it
No.
has some certain characteristics and we need to preserve it or buy general or buy credit from somewhere else, then this will fall under another process. But we'll go through this during site plan review and the notes of coverage process, basically. But it will fall under the state regulations.
So
at
the
end.
city would use a credit, or if that was the case?
It would be the applicant who would
Applicant
get
would get a case.
the grading permit, but
Okay.
it will all be according to the city requirements. The city will ask for a notice of coverage and an ARAP to remove it in order to issue a grading permit. Katie can answer that too.
Okay.
Good afternoon. So if TDEC allows them to remove the wetland, the city does not have any requirements. If the wetland were to remain, we would require a buffer or water quality protection area around that wetland. But if TDEC allows it to be removed, we don't have any extra requirements.
Okay. So would it be safe to assume that that wetland's going to be gone and further water, a wetland, there's water is going to have to go somewhere else?
Yes.
And then we already have this other drainage, and it looks like from the comments, there was some significant drainage issues already. So what's that look like at the end?
They will account for that additional water coming from the neighborhood in their design with their detention and making sure that they have adequate storage for that water as well as their own.
Okay. And so this detention pond is where the current playground is that right, or the plan?
I will let them speak to their design.
Okay.
So currently, there is a small detention pond on site, and there is an existing depression. There is a watershed that drains to this area, and everything slowly drained through the culvert under DeJarnette Lane. The plan is to calculate the existing volume and design an underground system that falls under the parking lot to accommodate the increase of the addition and the existing, and at the same time keep the water surface elevation at the existing or below level and maintain either the existing situations or make it better.
Is there a pumping system?
No, there is no pumping system. It will be an underground vault under the parking lot. We've done a calculation to calculate the volume. We haven't been into the product type yet, but there are several products that we can utilize. They vary from plastic chambers, pipe, concrete vaults, or any of that. We're just gonna pick the best product for this situation and apply it here.
So where does the water go after? I mean,
So
there's
the
to
water
a
will
point.
the water will be held, stored, and then released slowly to the existing pipe under DeJarnette Lane to maintain the same existing situation as of now or make it better.
Okay, okay. I guess the last question I got is looking at the size of this acreage tract with the additional improvements that are proposed with all of the other paved area, not a whole lot of green space left. And I don't know, as I see and hear other schools being built, high schools, middle schools, it looks like they're typically using anywhere from 20 to 40 or 50 acres or more, and there's only like 18 acres on this whole project. Is that irregular? You know, how this is going to be, the ratio, is that within reasonable ranges?
The project will be designed to meet the city requirements for this zoning, so we're gonna maintain the same open space requirements required by the city as far as for the landscape and open space. Brian, the landscape architect that designed this project, is here. He can speak about the landscape requirements and the open space, but we plan to meet those as stated by the city regulations.
Okay. Thank you.
So you feel like, just touching on the wetland area back there, because I guess from history that can throw you a curveball, you think you might be able to mitigate it or remove it. Is there a scenario where they don't let you do that, or what's a worst case for that? I assume you have plenty of parking, so it would be convenient for the school use, but is there a chance that parking's not available or can't build back there?
I'm not gonna speak for TDEC, but I feel we can remove this wetland. The size of this wetland is not significant, so
Okay.
I would have to calculate the area, but if it's below quarter an acre, that's a simple general permit, 30-day processing, and
Okay.
it can be removed.
Okay.
Anything larger than that, there is a process to remove it too,
Okay,
but we're gonna cross this road when we get there.
okay. So I assume this underground drainage is a pretty extensive process compared to the detention pond for this site. I guess we hadn't seen many of those detention ponds be able to remove those, but I guess you guys are prepared to handle all that.
Yeah, we're gonna have to
Okay.
detain the water and put
Right.
it somewhere which will be in an alternative system than a surface pond.
Okay.
I was just going to say, we have numerous underground detention systems around town that you're probably not even aware of.
Sure, I'm sure. Okay. Any further questions for the applicant? Thank you very much.
Thank
We'll
you.
give you a break for now. At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. If there's anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you'd come to the podium there and give us your name and address and provide us any comments you may have.
Excuse me for my bad English. I'm from another country. I'm living behind the school.
Can you give us
I'm
your name and
living
address, please, sir?
2276 Alexander Boulevard.
Okay.
The wet area there was about 4 acres. I bought my home because there is a big 4 acre behind my home with wet area. This wet area, after the school, they built the first part, they decrease it to half acre or quarter acre, I don't know. But this one affect all my backyard line. My backyard become road. And I have always, my backyard is wet. And the school, what they do, they put their drainage, they elevate their, the school yard above me about 1 or 2 or 3 feet, and they let their drainage on this wet area, and all Alexander Boulevard and all the area, the drainage, there is a drainage near between my home and 2280, there is a drainage line to this wet area. They destroy this area. They already destroy this area because the drainage and the storm water become elevated, and now I feel I can have flood area in backyard. And no one responds for anything. They only need to build the school. I don't know how high school and middle school and primary school build on this small area. Any public school has a big area and this in between homes. And they affect mainly Alexander Boulevard from 2272 until the end of the. And then there is another thing, the noise. They always has party in this area. The trash bins put it beside the homes of this area, so the trash collector every day at 3 a.m. must have trash, always has issue with this school, and no one responds for anything. And I don't know, storm water here in city, I never see what happened for storm water, what happened for the area behind the school and behind the homes, all this affected. And now they want to, this area was about 4 acres or 3 acres, collect the water of all areas. Now they not half of acres, and all the water comes there and become affect all the backyard of all these homes. I don't know, no one responds, no, I try to speak, but I don't, until I hear another zoning, this is a big issue. Because all the storm water, after that, all the area will be flooded. Alexander Boulevard, everything will be flooded because they take all drainage for this storm water. I don't know what happened, but this parking lot, they never can make a store with 3 or 4 acres of storm water. 2 or 3 years, now there is a decrease in water or the rains. If you see, from 2 years, there is, but when I left there from 2014, it was flooded 4 or 3-4 acres with the water. So if the water increase, there is no storage for this area at all. And no area in this, all the areas, there is no open area or wet area, another wet area. So they can't store this water. They make issue for all who live in Alexander Boulevard in another area. A lot of storage area will be decreased because I see by myself, and I will already hire lawyer because my backyard will come to a road. I see the trees become full. I see this every day. I don't know, but that's what happened for me, direct impact from school. Even the last time zoning was about this half or acre behind me, but they left it for the water. When they left it for water, they make this issue for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. My name is Larry Vanover. I live at 2292 Alexander Boulevard. When you look at the maps, I have lot number 4. And so I am currently right behind the parking lot that has been constructed already and right behind the start of the new access road. So I want to follow up on the drainage. The volume of water that goes into this low-lying area is over 8 feet deep when we get a very heavy rain. The rains we've had over the last 4 days is probably about 3 foot deep right now. You know, the amount of water that this vault system is going to have to hold is huge. This drainage area is all of Northwood subdivision and a subdivision that goes out near Northfield. So all the water from these areas drain and end up in this one low-lying area. It goes into a culvert that's underneath Desjardins Boulevard, and then that goes into another retention in Bradford subdivision. And from there, it just keeps moving on down until it gets to VA Lake. So this is an extension from all the way from Northwood subdivision. This water will end up at the VA Lake and eventually into the Stones River. I don't see the vault system being able to control the height of the water without the water flooding into the backyards, our backyards, and partially onto the new parking lot that they are proposing to build. So I think that there needs to be a real consideration from the planning department on how this is going to be built and how much water this will really retain. If you look at the culvert that now goes, I can't pull the map up. Can you pull the map up for the?
Was it on one of your emails?
That's it.
Oh.
If you look where the new school is being proposed, the sidewalk that is coming out of it in the front towards Desjardins, that is where the culvert is that all the low-lying water drains to. And there's one culvert, and it goes underneath the road, and it dumps into another retention area. And from there, I'm not sure if it's piped from there or if it's just groundwater seepage from there. But when this area fills up, this low-lying area fills up, it takes several weeks for it to drain. Last year, it took long enough to drain that the ducks were having hatchlings, and they grew. So they, at least 3 or 4 weeks before the water went down to where they couldn't swim around. So I'll just say that there's a serious issue with the stormwater drainage. The wetland, I've been back there years ago. There's a natural spring in the wetland area. And I understand that that can be mitigated if it's the correct size. It does kind of confuse me on how much money the city of Murfreesboro has spent to create a wetland adjacent to Broad Street and the Discovery Center. and now we're going to cover a wetland up. So it seems like we're investing in one part of the city, and we're destroying something that's exactly what we're investing in another part of the city. Another area I'd like to discuss is the traffic. In the mornings, when the traffic comes in and the parents are bringing the kids to school, the traffic will back up past Alexander Boulevard. I went out and took a couple of pictures of it yesterday morning, and I was afraid I was going to actually take a picture of an accident, because what ends up happening is they block Alexander Boulevard. People are trying to come off of, they're trying to come off of Alexander, making a left-hand turn. And so what they do is they ease out, they get across one lane, and then they're waiting for the traffic to stop at another lane. And I thought this lady was going to hit when she tried to pull out across. So it's a very dangerous situation the way it is situated right now. I understand that we requested the traffic warrant last time they did in 2018 when they increased the enrollment in this school. Now we're going to increase the enrollment by another 114. Talking to the school, you know, they say they want to max out their enrollment at 1,000. But with the direction the state of Tennessee is going with the voucher systems, private schools are going to become more and more in demand. And so I can see the enrollment getting much larger in this school as well as some of the other private schools in town. So I would hope that when they do the traffic study for the stoplight, and if it does not meet all of the warrant, that there is some option to do a variance in order to create a safe area for the residents to get in and out of the neighborhoods, and it's also coming in and out of Bradford neighborhood. So it's very difficult with the traffic being slowed down because of the school zone, and cars are coming in at 40 miles an hour from one direction, 15 from another direction. It's extremely hard to make a safe left-hand turn out of there. And then, as it was mentioned about the fencing, I do appreciate the committee recommending the fencing across the entire western section of the neighborhood. I think that, yes. So where the new access road is, and I hadn't discussed this with the planning department, but the height of the fence definitely needs to be 6 foot above the pavement level or the curb level in order for not only noise mitigation, but also for headlight light pollution, because you're going to have people coming in at after hours. I mean, one of the reasons they built the gym was so they could hold basketball tournaments there. So this is going to be an after-hour usage in the whole campus. So that's really what I came for. It's the noise mitigation. When we were at the community meeting, they said there's new technology for sound buffer fencing that they would like to look at. And I think this privacy fence that's going to be built on the west side needs to include not only the 6 foot high privacy, but also sound mitigation from all the new traffic coming in and out and the parking. Thank you.
I'm going to sound like an echo. I'm sorry, but that's my neighbor from 2 doors down. The detention pond is
Get your name and address, sir, if you don't mind.
I'm sorry, 2300 Alexander.
And your name again?
Pardon?
Your name again?
Dan Pierce.
Okay, thank you.
The detention pond that's proposed would be, I assume, a similar area as what the retention pond is today. I've only lived here for a little over 5 years, and I've seen the water come up to my property line from this retention pond 3 or 4 times. I'm very concerned about the drainage of the drainage and retention capabilities. And I'll just agree with the comments about Alexander Boulevard. The problem is 3 times a day, morning, noon, and evening, or early evening. And that's, for me, if we had red and green lights at that time and yellow blinkers the rest of the time, we'd be just fine. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Tiffany Bigham. I live at 1307 Honeywood Place. I have a few questions, and then I have a statement I'd like to make. The first question is, with the new entrance road, will PCA have a need for 3 crossing guards? There are currently 2. I don't know who can answer that.
We'll address, I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you don't mind, we'll make note of your questions and try to get
Okay.
them answered, and I'm sure we'll touch into
Okay.
drainage some more
Okay.
after the public hearing.
And the other one is about lighting, and is there an option for the parking lot lighting to be on a dimmer system or a timer system? That was another question that I had. So, as I said, I live at 1307 Honeywood Place in the Northwoods neighborhood, and my property is adjacent to Providence Christian Academy at their soccer field, and a portion of the parking lot that was added in 2019 and 2020. My family has lived in our home for 22 years, and this proposed construction project will be the 5th one PCA has done since we moved into our house. The last project, running from early 2019 well into 2020, was the most disruptive due to the extended length of the project, the amount of excavation done, and the fact that we were at home during the COVID lockdown with 2 children trying to do online schooling. The ongoing negative impacts of the 2019-2020 project, which added the new gym and high school building and 2 new parking lots, is the reason I'm here to express my concerns about PCA's proposed project. It is said that a picture is worth 1,000 words, so I did bring some photos to share. Okay, great, thank you. Let's see. Thank you. The first ones that I'm sharing are taken from my back porch and an upstairs side window that faces PCA, and it was about 11 o'clock at night. They show the light intrusion created by the new gym and parking lot. Prior to that, we could look out the wall of windows on the back of our home and see nothing but darkness, much like this photo, which was taken in a different direction, looking away from PCA. The light intrusion has been an unpleasant and unexpected impact from that project. However, the impact on our home pales in comparison to what has happened to our neighbors on Alexander Drive. I'm not sure I can scroll. Oh, and this was the upstairs window looking towards PCA, and then looking the opposite direction. Let's see. The following photos are taken from Alexander Boulevard at both day and night, which show how the removal of trees in 2019 and 2020 exposed those neighbors to a direct view of the PCA campus and has resulted in extreme noise and light intrusion, loss of privacy, drainage concerns, and an overall adverse effect on their property.
Fix the pictures for her so the pictures come up. She's got some. She can scroll. There. Okay. All right.
Oh, okay. Let's see. So these are the photos taken along Alexander Boulevard. And then here are the photos taken about 9 o'clock in the evening that show the light intrusion from the school building and the parking lots. Almost done. Okay, that's it. Let's see. Let's see if I can get back to that. Okay. This aerial photo of the PCA property prior to their 2019 and 2020 construction. From it, you can see that a significant portion of their property that was covered with trees, which provided a generous buffer between the school and their neighbors on Alexander Boulevard and Westwood Drive. The photo on page 2 of the BZA staff report shows that a substantial portion of trees was removed during the 2019-2020 project. From the photo submitted by SEC, found on page 28 of the staff report, you see that most of the remaining trees in the back corner of the property will be eliminated for the new parking lot, and many trees in the front corner will be removed for the new building and roadway. I share these photos so you can see the impact that PCA's last project has had on their neighbors. One thing I'm not able to show you but do want to share with you is the extreme noise intrusion caused by the outdoor activities on campus during athletic practices and games, and the many annual events such as the Homecoming Parade, Greek Olympics, and the loudest one of all, the Fun Run. The sounds made on the soccer field and adjacent parking lot bounce off the metal exterior of the gym and onto our property. In our home, we also experience low-frequency vibrations from the sound system in the gym. When they play music during weekly chapel and basketball games, we can literally feel it, like being next to a car with the bass thumping. And speaking of cars, the drivers in the PCA parking lots really like to rev their engines, honk their horns, and set off their car alarms. There is such frequent noise intrusion coming from PCA, it makes it unpleasant being outside or inside our home when activities are happening on campus. There are 24 homes that share a property line with PCA. There are another 50-plus homes that surround the PCA campus. All are currently impacted in some way by the traffic, noise, light, water drainage, and trash created by PCA. I've personally communicated with homeowners and renters of 24 of the surrounding properties, and all expressed concerns about the issues I mentioned, as well as fear that the continued expansion of PCA's property will negatively impact their quality of life and property value. In conclusion, I would like to thank the City Planning Department, PCA, and Mr. Taylor of SEC for holding a neighborhood meeting to discuss the proposed project. From Ms. Smith's staff report, I believe our concerns were heard by the City Planning Department, and I appreciate the recommendations proposed to try and reduce the impacts of the project on neighbors. Unfortunately, I do not believe there is any way to make this project or PCA's continued growth be beneficial for their neighbors. In the 2018 special use permit request for the new gym and parking lots, Mr. Taylor stated that they would try to preserve trees and vegetation along the property lines, that the new turning lane onto campus would alleviate cars stacking onto Jarnett, and that project would have minimal impacts on the surrounding neighborhoods. Mr. Taylor made similar assertions about this project at the recent neighborhood meetings. Because we have seen the negative impacts on our homes and neighborhoods from the 2019-2020 project, we are hesitant to believe that this project will be more favorable. For all the reasons I have stated, and many others, I believe that PCA's proposed building, roadway, and parking lot will have a substantial and undue adverse effect on the adjacent property and the character of surrounding neighborhoods and the traffic on Jarnett Lane. Furthermore, I believe that the proposed building, roadway, and parking lot will result in the destruction and loss of a natural habitat with significant number of mature trees, many of which are on a wetland, which is under the jurisdiction of TDEC, which was mentioned before. I do not believe this proposed project meets the requirements of items 1 or 4 in the standards of general applicability, so I respectfully ask that the BZA deny this special use permit request or table it until those standards can be met. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Bigham. That is my mom. I also live at 1307 Honeywood Place. I have a brief statement that I really just end with a question. So mostly I just want to, speak to many of the points that my mom has brought up and to elaborate on some of them, specifically noise. But first, I would like to thank Principal Planners Holly Smith and Richard Donovan for their hard work putting together the city's review of this application, and also for Matthew Blumley, I believe the Assistant Director of Planning, who has been really helpful throughout this process. So I attended PCA from 2005 to 2011, from kindergarten to 5th grade, and it was very convenient since my home does share a property line. And I remember being able to walk through the trees to get there and see the big grassy field that is now the sports field. I remember playing behind the school after it was over in the big cedar glade that's there and the current wetlands. I also remember playing on the large rocks that are where the current playground sits. So needless to say, I've seen a lot of changes even during my time at PCA. But I did end up leaving, even though I loved the school environment, I loved the pep rallies, the sports, the school life there, and I continued my education and ended up at school in North Carolina. However, even though that took me away for a bit, I ended up back at home during the pandemic in 2020, where I was working on a film degree. Now, one of the things that you have to work on in a film degree is sound. And unfortunately, I had to alert my professors that during the 2020 spring semester, while PCA's last project was going on, I was unable to record clean sound in my own home, even in insulated areas, due to the construction noise going on next door. Now, I know that with this project, there is proposed, underground detention. However, that also means that we live on a very rocky surface. We have tried to plant trees, and they have died because there's too many rocks in the soil. And thus, if they want to build that underground detention, that means a lot of blasting, which is a concern both for me as I still work in the film field and have to record sound in my home, and also just for other people who are working from home who would find that a disturbance to their days, in addition to what perhaps the, proposed increase in student body would bring. So I've said that, currently, I live in that house, I work from that house, and I want to speak a little bit about the Boosterthon Fun Run that I think my mom touched on briefly. So I believe in the city's sound ordinance and in the zoning codes, building codes, I can't remember which one, but they said that external speakers may not be added to a building, if that's correct. I think I'm right. But that does not include or extend to the external speakers that they bring in for these events, these assemblies, other such things, either spontaneous or planned, that we may or may not be alerted to. And personally, on the day of the fun run, I had work that I needed to be doing, and I couldn't very easily call PCA and say, hey, I need you to stop your fun run because I'm working and it's a nuisance to me and I can't go elsewhere to do this. However, I am concerned mostly that the changes to PCA's campus thus far have significantly affected the quality of my life and the lives of my family, my neighbors, some here, some who were not able to make it, and folks that I don't even know, some even in Bradford Place or beyond the radius that was alerted. And while this project and with its current and potential future modifications may or may not continue to its completion, PCA's continued expansion in their current location is troubling to me. I understand that the economic investment and emotional significance of this location is very strong for Providence Christian Academy, as it is its home. Obviously, it has been there quite a while, but it's also my home. It's a lot of other people's homes. It is a residential area. If my neighbors next to me were sending water my way, if they were sending lights my way, if they were sending sound my way, I don't know how I would arbitrate that other than, speaking to the city or, filing a petition or otherwise. I also spoke with my mom and with my mom to many of the neighbors who were not alerted to this project at PCA, who are significantly impacted by PCA's activities, and many feel that there is nothing that they can do as we feel encroached upon in our own homes by PCA and its continued expansion. So while I hold a lot of fondness for PCA as somebody who went there, I also implore both the city and PCA that past this project, they might consider future expansions in a different location, due to the changes we've already seen from this last project's completion and the ones proposed in this meeting. And I guess my final question for you all is, we've seen a lot through this process that in the 2018 meeting, there were a lot of things that were proposed and assured to both homeowners and the city that were not followed through on satisfactorily, or perhaps mitigated things as they should have. What would our process be as homeowners and neighbors to try and advocate for ourselves, advocate for our quality of life, moving forward, either because I don't think anyone wants to file any lawsuits, but rather do it civilly through the city or some other means? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michelle Boyer Pennington, and I live at 1310 Honeywood Place. I've lived in my house for more than 20 years. I'm a neighbor of Tiffany's. I'll trust that we have been through 5 major construction projects at PCA. I had lost count. I can tell you that a lot has changed since I moved into my house. My house does not abut the property, but I can see from my front yard down directly into the soccer fields area. And we hear all the noise as well. But the noise from the school right now isn't what I want to address. I want to address the quality of life issues that are going to occur if PCA moves on with the building they're proposing, and the damage that is going to continue to occur to the homes in that area from the jackhammering. Let me speak to the noise first. Come spring and summer, we all like to live out, we all like to spend time outside. But if you have jackhammers and you have bulldozers running all the time, and they're going to be running when the kids are not in school, which means that they're going to be running during the times that families are at home in our neighborhoods, in our houses, when we'd like to be outside. But that noise is enough to make someone insane. I can attest to that. You just want to spend time inside, but the vibrations are incessant. The vibrations also cause houses to shift and houses to settle. This past few months, I've had to replace 2 doors on the side of my house that face the Providence property. Not just the door, but the whole door frame, because that whole side of my house has settled and I have huge cracks in the ceiling. When the door installer came to install my outside door facing Providence, he had to jack up one side of the door frame that much. So having another project like this causes me some real concern, because at some point I will have to pay to have my house jacked up. And yes, there's a lot of construction that occurs in Murfreesboro. We can't get around that. But if this were a neighborhood going in, we would not be experiencing the same sound problems and the same quality of life issues that come from incessant jackhammering and bulldozing and hammering and noise equipment. And so spring is my favorite time of the year, but if this project goes through, I have to say that it's not a season I will get to enjoy outside. Thank you.
Board members, my name is Ross Bradley. I'm at 1610 South Church Street. Thanks for taking the time to listen to us today. I'm a parent. I have 2 daughters at PCA, and I was asked to be a part of this planning committee that is looking at these additions that we're talking about today. As we begin to look at them, there were several different things that became evident. The first thing is the waiting list that we have at schools. And I'm sure it probably is not a surprise to you that we have a strong demand for education in Middle Tennessee, especially Murfreesboro. It doesn't take long if you open the newspaper to see the county just continuous debates on needing to rebuild schools, and I think $130 million worth of school improvements that the county's gonna have to do. The city is continuing to look at school improvements. We're gonna have a capacity of 114 additional spaces for students with these improvements. These are all lower school, elementary age capacity. In talking with some council members, the value if the city had to go and build spaces for 114 students would be about $8 million just to build the building, not counting the reoccurring expenses. These are all expenses that PCA is taking on, not at the taxpayer's dollar, but at the expense of the school. I think that's an important thing to note. As I talk to council members, trying to figure out how we're going to deal with continuing to add capacity for the kids in our community to be able to go to school at a school that we have a waiting list that are ready to receive those students, I think is important. So that's just one attribute I think I would ask that you guys to take into consideration as you're considering this, is the demand that we have for education here in a place where we already have a school on a 4-lane road. I think traffic is really, really important, and that was a big part of our planning as we were going into this. We were very fortunate to be able to pick up an additional home there in front of our school. And we saw that as an opportunity because it gave us a third point of egress. And it allowed us to do some things that we haven't been able to do until now. And that was to be able to add 2 lanes into our school and add a turning lane that we don't currently have today. We feel like it's great. We love the fact that DeJarnette is a 4-lane road. You know, we don't see that like on Thompson Lane where the Siegel schools are at. I think that's a detriment to that area, not being able to have 4-lane for that full Siegel system. Here, the fact that we have the 4-lane is great, but we need that turning lane. And so I feel like that you asked earlier what the distance is there. It will allow a lot of those vehicles to get off the main road, stop blocking that intersection, and begin to get people into the school with a direct access. It also gives us a lot more stacking distance to be able to get cars into the parking lot. So what we're trying to do here is not just add more capacity, but we're trying to also solve existing problems. Now keep in mind, all the pictures and everything that we've seen have been built per the city's ordinances. So when you look at the lighting and some of these things, those are all built based on the city's photometric plans that the city requires for any school, whether it be PCA, any other private school, or any other public city or county school. So we're building to the same standards, but we're not doing that with taxpayer dollars, which I think is an important aspect as we're looking at this project. Stormwater, I agree 100%. When you look at it, I saw some pictures that somebody had sent in where the water was like at the very top. And it looked like if another inch of water came, it was going to be in somebody's backyard. And I was talking to Al's. He's the one that designed the detention system when we did the high school. And I congratulate him because you can tell it's working exactly the way it's designed. It's meeting the capacity that is needed. Today, we recognize that we've got to figure out how we can continue to absorb some of these students. What we're doing in adding the capacity in the lower school, the elementary school, is really the last expansion we can really do to add additional students. We have, at this point, I've got a daughter that's finishing up 5th grade, getting ready to go in the 6th grade. When you get into the 6th grade at PCA, we have additional capacity. And so our classrooms get bigger. We have more students per grade level. In K through 5, they don't have as much capacity just because we don't have the building space. So what we're able to do by pulling the preschool and K out of the main building, we're able to add 1 more classroom per grade level. And so that's how we're getting to that 114 students. So going back to stormwater for a second, we're looking at the site and we said, we've got this giant detention pond that is a hazard for us because we have to worry about standing water on a school site that's not ideal. It also, the other host of issues with standing water that we're constantly having to address. It's going to cost a lot of money to go underground, but we've done it. And I'm a real estate developer in my day job. We've done this on multiple projects. In fact, we just finished doing it on the Trader Joe's that we built here in town. And so underground detention is not a problem. It's more of a calculation. And I know Katie had mentioned earlier, she's done several storm underground detention systems. We're prepared to meet every requirement by the city. I agree. If I'm a neighbor and I live over here, I'd be concerned too. The last thing you want is have to worry about flooding in your yard or in your house or on your property. I agree 100%. We want to make sure that we do that perfect, that we meet the city's requirements when we're doing that. It's not easy, it's not inexpensive, but we have done it and there's plenty of systems that allow us to do it that way. The lighting, again, I mentioned, we're prepared to meet all the city standards. Our photometric plan, our lighting for the property is not going to be anything above what the standard requirements are within the city. What you see there is exactly what we've done, and that's what we continue to do. We want to be a good neighbor. We have a lot of families that live in these neighborhoods that surround PCA, and they covet those homes. They love being right next to the school. And so we want to be a good neighbor. I know noise is something we continue to address. We have kids there, and we have a lot of activities, but we also recognize the city has noise ordinance that we have to follow. And so the intention in talking to Dr. Sheets, who came today, who's the headmaster of the school, is he wants to continue to be a good neighbor. And if we have noise issues, we'll continue to address them. We've done it in the past, and we'll continue to do it in the future. And we have ordinances that we recognize that we have to follow, and we plan on continuing to do that. We will continue to work on the wetlands and make sure that we solve these problems. Again, we're not asking for anything special, but we have a need in our community to be able to serve the kids. And we feel like this is a way that we can do it that doesn't cost the taxpayers any more money, that is in a situation where we have a 4-lane road that we're going to have to make some tweaks to. We're prepared to do additional studies to determine if red lights are necessary, but we're willing to do what we need to do to be a good neighbor, but we're here to also serve the capacity and serve the students at PCA. So thank you so much for letting me speak.
Hi, I'm Lee Bigham. I live at 1307 Honeywood Place and have been there for 22 years. We sent both of our kids to Providence Christian from K through 5th. It was a good experience, and we're glad that the school is there. A couple of things. Over the years, I have communicated with Dr. Sheets about noise, and they have been responsive in most situations. The biggest thing that I've had to experience is the low frequency vibration from the gymnasium. There was a day that I was off last week that our house thumped from about 3:30 till the games were over around 9:30 that night. And it was just a steady low frequency vibration that I couldn't sit in my bedroom and read a book without hearing this bump. It's like truly like being on Memorial at a stoplight. And you know, I guess the proposed building use will not have a substantial or undue adverse effect on the adjacent property, the character of the neighborhood, traffic conditions. It has had a substantial undue adverse effect, in my opinion. I understand that's subjective. From the school's opinion, it's not. They are serving these children, but they are in a residential neighborhood. If you go look at the other schools in town, they have more land, they have more buffer. This is a small piece of property that they, I think, have already maximized. There is a green space that is partly behind our property. That's, I think, the only green space left that is usable by groups. So on Sunday afternoon, there will folks that will come throw a football. They'll back their truck up and play music that we get to enjoy. There's the noise ordinances. I don't know how you're going to enforce that. I just know that I can sit in my bedroom and tell you what they're playing in their truck. During basketball games, I played basketball. I enjoyed it. I loved it. We didn't have the sound systems they have now. When I asked about the sound, the low frequency vibrations, the response that I got was, well, we don't have an equalizer. I don't know how expensive equalizers are, but you know, we want to be a good neighbor as well. And I know that if my neighbor, you know, in my neighborhood was thumping my house, we would have some regress to that. I'm not sure what we can exactly do. I can sit in my living room at night and stare at a light in the parking lot of PCA. I understand that that meets the city's requirements. I'm still staring at a light. So I understand that those are the requirements set forth. I don't know that there's anything you can do about that, but I know that my property gets the benefit of, I guess I don't have to have a night light at night. I can get through the house fine. So just looking at the statute that was put forth there, I guess the qualifications to have this move forward, I'm not sure that they're meeting that. And I do think they want to be good neighbors. I've had good conversations with Dr. Sheets. He's been responsive. All of my communications haven't been responded to, but I don't have any ill will toward him or the school. I just want to make sure that my property in this residential neighborhood is protected. I know, and I live on the east side, not the west side, where this is going to be happening. But I also know that looking at the west side of this property, I guess I would look at that first article and see if it really meets it. So I appreciate your time, and thank you.
Good afternoon. Ben Parsley, 1703 Shagbark Trail, and I live in Northwoods. I'm also a parent at PCA. I have 3 children in PCA, and I also serve as a board trustee there at PCA. Our intentions are to grow and provide space for students that are wanting to get in our school. It's day in and day out that we have to not allow people to come in because we don't have the space. And we are strategic in all aspects of what we are doing. The Alexander Drive folks, their drainage issues is also a concern for us because the water at times when it's, I believe this gentleman talked about all the rain that came through not too long ago, the water fills our playground up right there on DeJarnette. The water coming from Alexander and the water coming from Northwoods creates a pond on our property. So we think with the engineer's help that the water issue and the underground detention and getting that situated to a point where it gets where it needs to be and then downstream will help everybody involved, including PCA, including the Alexander folks. It takes the experts to get together and come together and figure out a plan that works best. And we're on board to do that. We're not trying to be a hindrance to any of our neighbors on Alexander in regards to the drainage. Secondly, the traffic. I want to remind everyone that PCA is not the only school on DeJarnette. During that time frame, we have PCA, we have Oakland Middle, we have Oakland High School, and we have John Pittard all on DeJarnette. And there's a huge traffic study that needs to take place because not only does PCA have parents and students affected by the traffic, I'm sure those schools do too. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's a time where that traffic study needs to take place to where a light maybe at Alexander or somewhere else on DeJarnette could be effective for not just PCA families, but for the entire community that's traveling that street day in and day out, especially in mornings and afternoons. I want to remind the people here also that our plan is not adding anything more on the Northwood side. It's very strategic to the only space that we basically have left to provide more classrooms for pre-K and K students are this section right here by DeJarnette and Alexander on that side. Anything on the Northwood side does not change. Everything that's been done does not change. And so the lighting, I understand there's noise complaints. I also have noise complaints from Oakland High School football games at my back porch sitting there in Northwoods, not closer to PCA, but closer to that side, where you can hear everything from a touchdown to the band playing at halftime, including Floyd Stadium and MTSU. When those guys are playing, you can hear them from Murfreesboro. I don't know that there's an area in the city where you can't hear excessive noise from athletic events and school events in neighboring neighborhoods. Now, granted, the proximity in which the Northwood residents live are closer in proximity to those other areas. I understand that. But in no means are we trying to create noise issues with the fun run, with the kids are raising money and they get to go out and talk to their parents and talk to their family members and raise money for the school, and they get to go out and interact, asking for them for their assistance, and then they get to show how many laps around the field they can run based on the number of dollars they raised. I mean, it's a great event, and I welcome any of you guys there anytime to come watch. The noise aspect and the communication that the neighbors in Northwoods have is not what we're here for today, because that's not what we're asking for. The noise aspects and the construction aspect of this new pre-K and K building, we're welcome to work restrictions, time restrictions on when heavy equipment can be run during certain times of the day. It's not that we're going to be running jackhammers and nails and or hammer and nails 24/7. That's not reasonable. But we do want the opportunity to provide more places for students to sit and learn. That families have that opportunity to, if they want to attend PCA and they're accepted to PCA, that they have the space, and we have the space to let them in. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Peltier. I live at 1314 Shadbach Trail. My property backs up to the newest or oldest parking lot and the soccer fields. So I've been there since it was a horse farm. I don't know if y'all remember back in the day when it used to have horses. Very quiet, very peaceful. I don't mind living behind a school. It's not a problem. I love the life. I love to hear the kids screaming and yelling and having a great time. The noise does get loud. My problem is the lighting. I can sit on my back deck and have a beautiful advertisement of PCA. It's lit up all blue and yellow. It's gorgeous. I don't really appreciate it. I've tried planting, but it's not, you know, when you buy a plant, it starts here. Maybe in 30 years, I'll be able to block that light. On top of that, there's the lights. They're very bright. I have a little less than 2 acres that back up there, heavily treed. You can't even see my pool when they do the overhead shots. I mean, I have a heavily treed yard. Don't take them down. Still have bright lights at 2 o'clock in the morning in my bedroom window. My proposal to you is not to ask you to not put up lights. It is, can we figure out, before you put all these new lights on the other side, can't we figure out a way to make the lights go down when it's not busy? And maybe when basketball's coming out, sure, let's light up the parking lot. I don't have a problem with that at 10 o'clock when people are walking around. 2 o'clock in the morning, nobody's there. I got a problem with that. I appreciate that the noise level for the last gentleman isn't loud because he's on the other side of this subdivision, but that really doesn't pertain to us. We live right next door. I don't disagree with the growth. I just think we need to address the problems we have before we move on and add more new problems. Because those lights on Alexander Boulevard, you're not blocking it. Not for another 30 years. You're gonna have to have a magnolia tree that grows like a bean, okay? We can't replace, you can't replace high lighting with short planting. It's just that simple. So let's solve the problems we have before we get into more problems. That's all. That's me. Thanks.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
He's already
Do you
spoken.
have anything additional to add, sir?
Yeah, because I answered the gentleman because already the first thing they build, the first part, they do nothing. They make issue for all the neighbor. How can I trust the second zoning area or building? It will be affect everyone again and more. Because the first, everything, they build the school for the children and everything, but the waiting list and they talk about money. We talk about our life. It's not, they talk about their money. They will gain money. We are talking about our lives. But we saw the first area, there is a big issue. The second one, they destroy this area totally. I know because I see the water, and everyone, they didn't do anything for their neighbor. Only they protect their property and the children, but they never do something for the neighbor. They never do something. What's the issue with neighbor? They only we have water issue, water drainage issue. We have issue with noise. We have issue with light, and we have issue with traffic. All this and they didn't address it at first one, the small one. Now, the bigger one, a bigger issue, and no response.
Okay. We'll have those issues discussed for sure. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? All right, we will close the public hearing and open the floor for further discussions, eventually a motion. So it's kind of clear where the concerns are, so I guess it's worth chewing on those some more. The drainage and how to marry up a school that's there and their desires, along with being not impacting neighbors. So,
So I mean, I wrote down several things, questions that were asked. So I heard a comment about trash collection at 2 a.m. Is there anybody that, sir? If you want to address that issue or that question.
Sure, yeah, thank you. Andy Sheets, the head of school at Providence Christian Academy. And thank you for the neighbors. Thank you to the chair for the opportunity to address this. As we've walked through all of these processes, we're always communicating with neighbors as part of the open forums, conversations that happen with phone calls. This is one that we have addressed recently. We've sent letter and notification to the company that services our trash, asking them to serve us during the school hours, 8:30 to 2:30. So we've made notice of that. We have record of that communication. We're happy to provide it if needed.
And while you're standing there, so there was a question about crossing guards, if there would be now 3, or would they just continue to be 2, or have you gotten that far?
I think that's yet to be determined as we negotiate the traffic. Again, our goal is to get more traffic off of DeJarnette and to make this a more efficient process with the revised traffic flow. If we end up having to have 3, we'll have 3. We'll have to see how that process plays out.
Okay. So some of these other questions you're not going to be able to answer, so I'll address them to the staff that I've got. Go ahead if you got.
Yeah, I'm sorry. While you're here, can you speak to? I think that Ms. Smith mentioned the parking capacity. Mm-hmm. It's at 250% of what's required by the city. What is the need for the additional parking, especially that's going to be running parallel to Alexander?
Yeah, it's event driven. So on a given school day, we don't need the excess parking. But we have 800 students, approximately 500 families. When we host special events, when we have athletics in the evening, we need additional parking. Currently, we use overflow. We've got a great relationship with one church that's across the street. We also have an athletic facility that's across the street behind one church. And we do use that for overflow. It's not a safe option. We do it in exceptional circumstances, but we have to then negotiate how do we get people to cross the road, and we don't want to put police officers out there stopping traffic. So ideally for the larger events, we've got overflow parking on our campus. It's not a capacity issue. The Board of Trustees has determined the capacity of the school. It's 4 sections per grade level. This project gets us to 4 sections per grade level, pre-K through 12. So with this additional 114 students, we are at the capacity of our student body for this campus and have no intentions to move beyond that. Master site plan has been done for the rest of the campus. That would only include additional structures like cafeteria or fine arts theater. None of that would be capacity additions to our campus. So just events.
Certainly, I guess lighting a parking lot is a safety issue. Is there room to wiggle if this is not a continuous parking lot or in use all the time, where it's, I don't know if you want a dim parking lot, but is there, again, this is just off the cuff sort of thoughts, but obviously the lights around the parking lot in this confined area, even at the lighting plan for what's there is already in place. Are there options for that parking lot if it's not used all the time, but then not ignoring the safety issue of
No, it's a great question. I think a couple things. One, I love the pictures and I'm thankful for those. And I get to be on campus quite a bit in the evenings. And what I will say is what you notice from the pictures is you can see the lights, but it's actually dark up to the property line. And so we of course want to follow those photometric expectations and plans, as Ross said earlier. We want to follow the expectations of the city. You're going to see light off campus. We are, though, however, willing to explore. We just had a brief sidebar over there just to look at what's possible. Those are on timers. They're not on all the time. The question would be, we'd have to determine what's possible from a dimming situation, whether that can only address this expansion, whether that can be tied into the network of the current lights. I think we're willing to explore that. I think it would be a safety issue. Even when we don't have events on campus, it would be a safety and security issue to have those turned completely off. So I think exploring some kind of dimming, we'd be willing to take a look at to see what works within those systems.
So the other question to staff, in looking at the pictures that Ms. Bingham showed us, it is the berm, and I don't know if anybody's been out there to check, but is the berm that was committed to in whatever year it was, 2019, is that what's there today? Because it looks like there was some open area associated with the trees and that sort of thing.
I'd be glad to address it. I think we'd invite anybody to come out and look at that. We absolutely executed what was expected of us in the last construction project. We did it with the athletic facility across the way. I think there's a couple things about the pictures that, you know, they look like they've been taken in wintertime. And yes, there certainly is visibility. We took down what was a natural tree line. We planted back what we committed to with the city with that project. Obviously, that takes time. It's much more visible than it was because we took down much more mature trees and planted immature trees. But what was expected of us, we did follow through on. And of course, we would with this project as well. But obviously, we're going to see some vacillation when we look at winter versus spring and summer. There's going to be some differences in those things. I think that's all worth noting as well.
Okay. There was a comment made about the, Dr. Bingham was talking about the thumping noise, but maybe that could be remedied or minimized by an equalizer. I'm not a sound engineer, but is that is that legitimate?
I think, and I'm thankful for Dr. Bingham, who does reach out to me from time to time, and have enjoyed that relationship. I forgot about the equalizer, and so we'll go back to our IT team and see what's possible from an AV standpoint to add an equalizer there. I think one of the things one of the benefits to the relationship PCA has with our friends in Northwoods, North Springs, is that they can reach out to us, and we'd love to prevent things from happening before they happen, of course. But I think that's unlikely to be able to get on a call with Dr. McPhee or the principal at Oakland when there's a football game. And so we will continue to offer that up. And, you know, I've had calls from Dr. Bingham in the morning as a student comes on campus and their music's a little too loud, and we've immediately rectified the issue. I know you can't undo what's been done, but I think what it demonstrates is our commitment to serve our neighbors the best that we can. So we'll look at an equalizer to see what we can do on the gymnasium. We work very hard internally by setting volume limits on our AV systems. We do it across the street at the athletic facilities as well. When neighbors have reached out, we address those things, put sound limits on them. What I can't promise is that from time to time a student might get a hold of the sound and it goes a little bit louder than what it is. But when someone reaches out to us, we can absolutely rectify those situations when they come. But we'll certainly explore an equalizer to reduce the bass.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think the last question that I have is that one of the folks ask about, okay, if they see that, so if this is passed and we passed it with certain requirements associated with the application and those requirements are not met, what's their remedy? So I'll let you speak to that, Mr. Donovan.
Yes. So, I mean, really what that remedy is calling, letting the planning department know. We'll send somebody, we have a zoning inspector that we would send out to take a look at that and investigate the issue. And from there, we issue any letters and work with the property owner to remedy those violations. It would be, akin to any code enforcement or zoning violation that we have elsewhere in the city.
Thank you. Those are the questions that I heard and wanted to address. I'm sure there's others that.
The signal determination, I guess if you go in a little more of who initiates that, what would trigger a signal there?
Yeah, and by no means am I the expert on this. Ram Balachandra, the city's traffic engineers, who myself and Ms. Smith have had discussions with. What the understanding we currently have is there are signal warrants that they look at, which are a number of items. Right now, Ram knows that those are being met 2 times a day. What we're looking for is a continuous time period over the day. That's the reason you saw staff's recommendation for the applicant to complete the warrant analysis to see if we meet that, and it actually warrants a signal there. I don't know what those individual items are in the signal warrants. We leave those up to Ram to review and make sure that those warrant analyses are done in a proper manner.
Like was mentioned, I'm sure at every school around there's traffic during, start of school and end of school. So whether that would trigger a stoplight based on school hours, I'm not sure. So.
Yeah, and my understanding from Ram is we needed the continuous, not 2 peak times, one at either end of the day, but a continuous 8-hour block is what the warrant is looking for.
Okay.
Is there and I pass by this school a lot, I should know the answer to this question, but today, is there how the entrances work today, and I don't think this is the case, there's not a 2-lane entryway into the school. Is that a correct statement?
Well, on that side of the property, that's a correct statement. There's currently 2 entrances, but what we're looking at on that side of the property, we are more than doubling the stacking distance to get traffic off of DeJarnette.
Right.
So more than doubling. I don't have the exact figures, but it's more than doubling the access. It's also going to help with one way in, one way out. The flow coming out of DeJarnette should also be greatly improved as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I can see that, we deal with this stacking piece with, on the Planning Commission, on these restaurants and the issues that we have here. I realized the engineer got up and spoke early on, and I'm not a traffic engineer by any stretch of the imagination, but common sense tells me the further that we can have this turn lane closer to Alexander, the more people can stack in, and then you've got your internal stacking that's going on the campus itself. But I get meeting certain requirements, and I don't deal with TDOT every day by any stretch of the imagination. But I would only say is if it could be increased, meaning the length of beyond what TDOT would, as long as they would allow you to do it, it would make sense, because I have been down DeJarnette when people are trying to get into the school, and it's a pretty good madhouse. And I've seen the description of the gentleman talking about the person trying to turn left out of Alexander. They're taking their life in their own hands when they do that. So,
Can I just add a clarifying
sure.
point to that? There is currently not a turn lane
And I get
at
that.
that entrance
Yeah.
either, and it's 2 ways.
Yeah.
Which means you've got to almost come to a complete stop to be able to make the turn, so you don't hit somebody exiting. By having a two-lane entrance and adding that turn lane, the flow is going to improve, as well as the turn efficiency, and then the stacking distance as well.
Right, and that's where I was getting at about asking if an entry today has 2 lanes coming in. That was kind of my point. I agree. I think that's going to help tremendously, but I think the longer the turn lane is on DeJarnette, that's going to be helpful also. I'm done.
Okay, I guess partly comment here, but, and I'm trying to understand, as to what I think Mr. Parsley was saying, you know, obviously with the other schools, DeJarnette is already heavily trafficked, and coming across Alexander, myself, many times, it is very, very challenging when the school is in session or during those times of the day. And I'm still concerned about, you know, with the parking being actually the plan much more than what's required. And we already addressed the fact that there is, you know, where you're planning to build it, there's that wetland. And then already with the other, all the other new improvements proposed, the continued loss of green space and that effect, that bothers me. I think that, you know, I'm not sure whether our role is based on if all of these things that our staff is recommending to approve this application, if we knew what the state, what TDEC is going to do with wetland, if we knew about this proposed new drainage system, retention system, you know, if it had to be, there couldn't be any backing up on that as well. So those are still my concerns, and I don't understand what the neighbors are talking about as far as construction, with all the noise and the shaking and things that go on with that. You know, and unfortunately, that is a temporary situation, but you know, it is an unfortunate part of growth and expansion, and we've all dealt with that. But I'm just trying to get my hands around, possibly, is there any way of mitigating the parking area to prevent this water system and the loss of the wetlands?
One thing I just wanted to bring up, this not the concern you're mentioning right now, but as far as the wetland and TDEC, we will not issue any type of construction permits until they have their TDEC permits in place. So if for some reason TDEC would not approve the removal of that wetland, they will not start construction, and chances are we would see a revised plan, and they might be coming back to you with that revised plan. But I very rarely see TDEC deny it, but we always make sure they have those permits in place prior to starting any construction.
And actually, to that point, if I may hop in briefly, the zoning ordinance section 8E does provide, just to keep in mind, that the effect of the issuance of the special permit today does not permit the development to go forward. It just allows them to file their permits, which then has to go through the normal process. And so, you know, these unanswered questions that we have, they will be answering those before the permits are actually issued. So today, all that the board would be deciding on is whether to issue the special use permit, which only then allows the school to go forward with requesting their permits from the city. But it does not, today does not allow the development to go forward necessarily.
So is this going to come back before the Planning Commission for approval?
Yeah, this would be back before the Planning Commission for approval. You know, if essentially with the approval if the board decided to do it today, if for some reason the parking lot couldn't be built, but the other portions of the development they could proceed forward with the buildings, but not the parking lot, your approval would cover that. If they had to modify that parking lot in some manner, they would be back to amend the special use permit. If for some reason TDEC didn't approve the permits needed for that wetland.
Mr. Tips, I can answer that as well. Our consultant has completed the wetlands determination. They have sent their findings to the state, and TDEC is in the process of reviewing that to make a determination if they concur with that consultant's findings or not. So usually that's a 45-day or so process. So we've already completed the third party and consultant's study of the site, sent it to the state. The state will come out and look at it. and then they'll make their final determination. Regarding parking, I think we're in a situation, if all the parking that we add is just additional cost, and so we certainly don't want to have to add more parking than we would need. The problem we have is a lot of times, I mentioned I've got 2 daughters that are at the school. We just went through having Christmas programs and sporting events with basketball going on right now. And a lot of times when we have big events, the overflow parking is across the street at one church. It's not ideal to have families walking across a 4-lane road to try to get to the school. And so that was where we saw the necessity of really being able to try to provide additional parking. It won't be used every day, but when we have these events, graduation and different things, we need that extra capacity so that people aren't having to walk across the road. So,
How many times a year is that, just out of curiosity?
you want to talk to that?
That's a big issue.
Well, I think parking is an issue maybe once a week, potentially on some level where we fill the capacity. That doesn't necessarily move to overflow. You know, if we're playing basketball with MTCS, we're out of parking. And so beyond that, it's Christmas programs. It's a more of a rare event. The fun run may have been an issue, but most of the time what we try to do is we try to mitigate that ourselves by making our faculty park across the street, our faculty parks at Sportscom. So we continue to try and remedy those situations where we can and when we can. But I'm sure you can understand, most of the time you want people to be able to park on your property for a particular event. So it's a fairly uncommon issue. It might come up during a sporting event once a week where we're filling the property but we're not overflowing yet. It's the exceptional cases where we will actually overflow and then need to go across the street. So I think for us, while the final master site plan, but we're not putting that in front of you today, has more parking on it, what we're looking at is just adding those additional spots in that southern corner where the wetland mitigation is at issue at this point. And so, later on we can make the determination. The other piece is, we have a large retention pond, but actually one of the things we're doing with the playground is tripling or quadrupling the size of the playground, which includes a great deal of green space to be able to maintain green space on the property as well. So it's currently wet. It will then become green when we make this, if this property expansion can move forward.
Well, excuse me, just quickly, can you speak to that master plan and how that impacts the utilization of the entire site? I guess, looking at what's proposed now, it almost looks, with the exception of the ball field, it looks like 100% utilization of the lot. What additional, you mentioned cafeteria?
Yeah, there's 3 things, but this came up during the public hearing at our property. It's hard to determine. That's the current plan. Down the road, we would love to have a theater on campus. We would love to have a small cafeteria adjacent to the high school building. And those are the last 2 structures that we currently would like to see on our campus. We don't have taxpayer dollars and we don't have access to unlimited funds. So we're likely talking a decade or more down the road before we're able to come back in front of you, because we also have a property across the street where we're trying to put a football stadium and softball, soccer combination field. So that's our internal future ideal plan, but there would be a whole lot of time and a whole lot of decision making that would need to take place before we brought that back in front of the BZA.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, quick question for staff. So for the sound issues, we haven't seen those a whole lot, but there are ways to test the sound at a property line. With lighting, there's photometric lighting, all that sort of thing. And while the engineers, and again, I'm no expert in drainage, is there a way to, or any recourse for a resident that said it's now worse after this than it was before? Or is there a way to judge that, or is there enough experience in the water management guys that, hey, that's not an issue? Or is there any recourse, say, it wasn't this bad before? If you get what I'm...
Mr. Blomley may have to pitch in on this one, but I believe
a tricky one.
our police department is responsible for enforcing the noise ordinance, is my understanding. I'm not sure how they may or may not be equipped
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
that's a fuzzy one. I get it. Maybe there's not, and maybe there's enough. Hey, this is the volume we expect to see in a normal 10-year period, and you get a 50-year rain, and then it's going to back up where it didn't used to. So,
well, and I think it depends on the adjacent use. So, in other words, I think, and the time of day as well. So, I think our noise ordinance speaks to, if you are past a certain hour and you're adjacent to residential uses, then you have a certain limitation on the decibel level that is outputting from your property, and so on and so forth. So, and I believe the police department does have technology that they use to measure that. How those are used or what that looks like, I don't know. But yeah, our police department is who is responsible for enforcing the city's noise ordinance.
we had a church one time that had music that was close to residential that I think used that. I guess that, what I was getting at is there are ways to measure the impact there. The drainage as an issue in and around this site. I mean, again, there's really smart engineers working on it, and you guys are looking at it too. Just wondered if you thought you were going to get it all off, but you didn't, and here's the recourse that a neighbor has if he's seeing more water. But that may not be something.
So I will say, just to echo what Ms. Knowles said a few moments ago, is that it's incumbent upon the design engineer to give us a plan that shows that they are not putting any more water on the adjacent properties. And then our staff, Ms. Knoll, and the other engineers in our department review those plans to make sure that they agree with the logic and the protocols that they're using to get to draw that conclusion, to make sure that they have the supporting data, and to make sure that their plans reflect the implementation of that drainage plan. And so our engineering staff will not allow a plan to be approved. And here at the Board of Zoning Appeals, we're talking about a special use permit. So we're talking about the land use entitlement. Will this use be allowed to move forward on this property? And then if the answer to that is yes, then the next step is for the applicant to submit for site plan review, which has the full civil drawings, at which time our engineering staff would review for compliance with our design standards for drainage, and hold the applicant's engineering team to those standards in their design.
Thank you.
But what if it doesn't work? I mean, what if I got water on my property after they build a parking lot? Like, what's the report? What is it?
We have public works inspectors and also stormwater inspectors that would inspect during construction. If there were a problem to come up, we would probably send those same inspectors out to investigate. We would touch base with the design engineer, and we would work with them to come up with a solution for that problem.
Is this something you've experienced, or well,
Yes.
maybe dream it? Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a process for that as well?
Yes, there is.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Abbas Ahmed with SDC again. So as Mr. Bradley said, we've designed the first system on PCA, and it's actively functioning. The water is getting to the where it needs to be per the calculations that we submitted to the city before. We plan to continue that when we design the new system. We're going to make sure we're not exceeding that, or we bring it below that water surface elevation to make sure we're not flooding neighbors, and we're either maintaining the same situation or we improve it. As Mr. Knoll, Mrs. Knoll said, we're going to submit those calculations and get them approved, and work with the city to meet the standards.
All right, thank you.
I know, I'm going to make this comment, and so I get to serve on this board, and I get to serve on the Planning Commission. So I will have the opportunity to see the site plans when they come before the Planning Commission. Comments that are made a lot of times at Planning Commission, whether they come to fruition or not, I'll be the first one to say this, is that, you know, we're hoping with a, with any new development, and with the help of the engineer for the applicant in question, is that at times that not only are we not going to make it any worse, but hopefully we can make it better. And I'm talking about the water mitigation is what I'm speaking to. And so, you know, at the time that we review these site plans at a planning commission level, you know, that's going to be my first question to SEC is, you know, I get that we're meeting the requirements, but are we making it better? And, you know, I think that in this instance, we kind of owe it to these folks to try to do the best that we can to make it better and not just at the same level that we are today. I think that that would be the commitment of the applicant too, from the standpoint of wanting to be a good neighbor. I actually, you know, I think and I may be proven wrong, but I think that this application will help the traffic piece in and of itself because of the stacking situation that they don't have today. You know, I can't speak to the light piece. All I can do is hear what the applicant's saying, that they'll look at and see if there's the ability to dim the lights, or at least the lights that they add to this property. And, you know, the noise thing, I wouldn't care for that, just to be quite honest with you. I don't care for it when I'm driving down the road, and wouldn't care for it to be where I hear it in my house. So I hope that as part of this process, that can be somewhat mitigated also. And I know several people in the crowd that are representing PCA and feel like that they'll do their best to try to follow through on those items. So just some general comments.
Yeah, and I'll echo what Mr. Halliburton mentioned. You know, appreciate the applicant working to improve the flow off of DeJarnett with the additional access road. I would prefer to see the same buffer that, and it's not represented in this image here, but maybe if staff could scroll to the proposed image, that we could mirror that buffer, thank you, that is along the proposed road that then runs parallel to Alexander. Once it breaks into the existing parking lot, that we could mirror that buffer going into the proposed parking lot. That would be my only comment and ask relative to this plan.
So if I can clarify the question, what you were saying, so this area here is the area that you're talking about?
The buffer there as well. I'm not sure what direction, if that's west.
This would be the westerly side of the property, that's to the top.
And then along the north side of the proposed parking lot there as well.
You're talking continuous across
yeah.
that westerly
Yep.
in the southerly direction.
That's right.
Where it's equal with that new proposed roadway.
That's right.
Yeah, I agree with that, yeah.
And then there was the city's comment about right now they're not proposing a fence there either as part of the buffer. But the city's asking, or if I'm understanding it correctly, the city's recommending that a fence be placed there also, or am I misunderstanding that?
No, Mr. Halliburton, you're understanding that correctly. One of the conditions that Ms. Smith read into the record would make that entire westerly property line a type C buffer with a fence.
Okay.
And have a consistent buffer along that edge.
So is this the other area you were talking about, a buffer along this portion that's not a buffer currently?
It would be to increase the buffer, so to match, and you can translate for me if you don't mind. So we have this proposed roadway with an increased buffer here. when we moved into this proposed parking area, we lose some of that depth right along there. Could you describe those dimensions?
So you're talking about along the pink line that's curved along the proposed roadway, and then you look to the back to the proposed parking lot area, the depth between the edge of pavement for that new road and the edge of pavement of the new parking lot.
That's right. And that existing parking lot area, you know, that decision, it looks like, has already been made. But for this proposed parking area, and in the context of, you know, a master plan that's going to further increase the density on this lot, I would hate to see that we lose the opportunity to retain that buffer for those homes that are along Alexander and can't go back as we have with this existing parking lot, because presumably we're not going to ask the applicant to, you know, remove those parking spots. But I would imagine that this proposed parking lot, this larger proposed parking lot, that it could be reworked to still retain, you know, a good number of those, probably not all, but that would allow for that increased buffer for those homes along Alexander as these probably first 5 in off of DeJarnett get to benefit from.
Yeah. Also, do you understand what she's talking about there? It would essentially be that row of parking coming out.
This one, Richard?
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so basically you're saying in this area adjacent to the parking that you're leaving more of the mature growth and then you're still having the parking, but basically you don't have 20 feet of asphalt that's head-in parking that's facing towards the residents.
That's right. And that then would mirror the buffer area along the new proposed road.
So it's basically very similar to this one that has existing mature growth, plus they're adding a buffer. So what you're saying is the treatment that they're doing at that front portion, that portion should be mimicked towards the southwesterly portion.
That would be my
So this section
suggestion.
to look more like that.
Great. So, look, can I ask you a question? So, I think there's 40 parking spots right there that would go out. Under a type C buffer, the way I understand it, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, you can reduce your landscaping by half if you add a fence. What we're talking about doing is meeting the type C buffer with the landscaping. If we didn't cut it in half by 50% and went ahead and added the fence, would that be acceptable to match what we're already doing? I'm just concerned if we eliminate 40 parking spaces, we're just going to be a little short on parking, and we're not solving that problem of making sure we can park everybody on campus. The other thing that happens when we're not parking people on campus, as I'm sure you've probably seen in other places, people start to invent parking spots. And so next thing you know, they're parking in landscaping, they're parking in grass areas, or blocking, you know, parking on areas that are not designated parking spots. And so that's the important part for us, trying to preserve those. If that's a deal breaker, then we can try to figure it out. But
yeah, I'm not saying eliminate 40 exactly. I'm saying that the lot can be, or the parking or proposed parking can be reworked either on that area. Maybe it's not you know preferable, but you know it could extend into the area behind the existing gym. So I'm not saying straight up eliminate the 40, but I'm saying, you know, and you've have experience with this, taking a parking lot and reworking it. And yes, in the total area, you may lose some spots, but that it can be configured in a way that you're not, if you're moving 40 spots, you're not necessarily eliminating in total.
So as an example, looking at just the portion that I scrolled in, a parking stall is 20 feet in depth. So if they wanted to retain those ones that are head-in facing towards the residential, they could probably lose 2 rows here, and that would be that same depth. So there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 there versus 44. So you have a net loss where you're still retaining 30 of them, but you're taking out some of those additional ones, depending on, I mean, there's a couple of ways that you can slice it. But staff does believe if you do have that head end, definitely the fence that they're proposing, we would want to keep that so that, you know, a fence will block lights. So if somebody's coming in to park, that's not shedding into the residential adjacent.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's, you know, to make my point there that, yes, you may be losing 12 to 14 in that immediate area, but you know, if we're considering that they are going to continue to develop this entire lot, that, you know, there's likely going to be additional parking opportunities, you know,
Yeah.
knowing that.
And kind of what I would recommend to the board is, you know, if there's an increased buffer that we feel is necessary as a board, the board feels is necessary, you know, that you make that a condition of approval and allow them to relocate the parking, you know, allow their design professionals to work on that versus us trying to kind of do on the fly design here.
Yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to point out is the type C buffer is a recommendation from staff as a way to mitigate the impact of the development on the adjacent properties. That's not codified in our zoning ordinance. That is a recommendation from staff as a means to address the standards that are in our zoning ordinance. The Board of Zoning Appeals has the authority to place reasonable conditions on special use permit requests in order to mitigate the impact of a use on the adjacent neighbors. So the ultimate decider, if you will, of what the proper buffer is along that property line is you.
So thank you, Mr. Blomley. So I think with that, I mean, I think we're all in agreement that we would like to see that buffer improved, and even if it requires the reworking of that proposed parking lot, I'm sure the engineers could come up with a way that you're certainly not losing. You know, we don't want that from a safety perspective either. We don't want to see the loss of 40 proposed parking spaces in the context of them having to, you know, park off-site currently, but on net to mitigate the impact on those neighbors, that's something that I would like to see.
May I add something? So we will be keeping the 12-foot type C buffer with the fence as presented, and it is possible to move the parking spaces to the east or to the south of the screen, but are we looking for moving it another 10 feet just to provide what I see in front of me is probably between a 20 to 25 foot open space, so we can probably provide more open space with keeping the same buffer requirements.
And I think, the dimensions that we're talking about are what's currently proposed for the distance between the proposed roadway.
So currently, the proposed roadway is 20, I want to say 20, between 22 and 24. I think it's 22 feet, and the parking spaces are 19. What we're looking at is keeping the existing parking the same, and we play with the proposed and shift the parking lot to the south of the screen to provide more open space in the north between the neighbors and the new parking lot with keeping the same buffer we're presented on the screen. Is this
Yes,
what we're
and
looking for?
including the proposed fence as well.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, yeah, we can do that.
Thank you.
So I was just going to say, I don't know, Richard, if you've taken that into effect, have thought how that might affect how the condition reads, but I'm thinking it's condition number 4 that talks about that type C buffer. And what I think I heard is an additional 20-foot separation shall be provided along this would be southwesterly parking lot.
Ms. Smith,
And did I hear and retaining the
perhaps
trees?
setback rather than separation. Perhaps setback rather than
Setback,
separation.
perfect.
Because I think that's what we're getting at, is setback from the property line.
Another 20-foot setback shall be provided along the southeasterly parking lot. And did I hear that we're retaining any existing trees, mature trees that would be in that 20-foot area?
If possible, the drawing that you had earlier it appeared to have a swale in it. So is that how it exists currently?
Yeah, correct. So currently along that area, there is a swale along that property line where that first probably 20 feet is.
Yeah, but I mean, the goal either to, I think with that increased setback, then that, that gives you some, at least some free, some area either to retain the existing tree line as best as practical, or to come back with plantings or a berm in addition to the proposed fence in order to mitigate the impact on those neighbors there. Not knowing the topography there, I
Correct, and we have not seen grading plans yet, and so as we look at a site plan, what we would do with the conditions is make sure that the conditions of the BZA are met as we're going through the site plan. So I'm just making sure that we fully understand what your intent is, and I think that that captures what your intent is as we move forward. And of course, Ken will be watching this like a hawk when he sees it come back to the Planning Commission as well.
Thank you.
So it's 20-something.
In the site
Well,
plan review,
the parking lots are 19 feet, and so he was talking about that it comes back to where the parking, which would be an additional 19, 20 feet.
So with moving the parking lot 20 feet south, that's probably going to make us lose significant number of parking. So I was more talking about moving it 10 feet and make the total closer to 30 between the back of the parking and the property, in addition to the type C buffer and the fence.
What is that current dimension for the area that is between the proposed roadway so basically match the setback from the distance between the proposed road, the new proposed road, and the rear property line, to create a matching setback between that proposed road and, there you go, thank you. It's essentially that dimension.
That's probably a 40-foot, and if we were to do that on that side, we're looking at losing, it's 18, this is 20, that's 20, that's 20, that's probably 40. So, yeah, but I'm looking at the parking, so the parking depth is 19, and this is a similar distance, so it's 40 feet. So that's still a big hit on the number of parking, and we're looking at maximizing the number of parking due to the reason that we discussed earlier in the meeting. So I'm requesting the committee to allow the 30 feet, and which will allow us to lose, looking at 10 or 12 parking spaces, along with providing and enhancing this side by providing the fence, the buffer, and the additional 10 feet on top of that.
So how many feet from the property line? Are you saying 30 feet?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. Which right now it's 12 as proposed?
It's probably more than 12, because the parking space is 19 feet deep, and the distance between the back of curb and the property line is comparable. So it's currently looking at a little bit more than 19, say 20. So we're adding another 10 foot, which is approximately the width of the parking space.
There's also, I guess, lighting on those corners and in between on that buffer that you're looking at, the 12, where this proposal is. Aren't there, those are lights, I assume, right there with the asphalt, with the parking, as you're right there where you're drawing? Are those street lights drawn in there, or what is that?
So this,
trees.
I think they're trees.
Or they're trees? Not there, I'm talking in the actual
So
spaces.
The parking lot's lights
Yeah.
are here, here,
Okay.
and
Thank you.
here on that location.
And that's, I mean, I think that's another reason why this is essential to have a deeper setback, because of the things that these neighbors have been voicing is noise and lighting, light as well. So really, I think to try to mitigate as much of this as you can, you've got to have a little deeper setback. And I think that's in view of what you're saying, isn't it, Bob?
so with this proposal, with moving the parking 10 feet, we're looking at moving everything along with it 10 feet, with the lights, with the fence, with the screening buffer, which will put that approximately a little bit over 30 feet away from the property line and from the neighbors. The city ordinance is half a foot candle of lighting along the property line. I don't remember those numbers.
While he's looking, as part of the site plan and the photometric, will they redo the whole site? The photometric lighting plan?
So when we do ask them to provide it for the full site, I mean, here it's going to be updated. I think if the body wanted to require it as a condition of approval, that would be more than in your authority to do so.
So currently, the numbers vary between 0.4 to 0.1. Sliding this another 10 feet, it will reduce it. I'm not sure by how much, but it will definitely reduce it more than that.
And it might be more helpful for staff, and John, if you can help as well. When we talk about setbacks, setbacks are building setbacks. They're not necessarily where a parking lot can go. And so it may be easier to define in this particular case that the pavement be X many feet away from the property line, because it sounds like otherwise it's very confusing where that is, because a type C buffer is 12 feet. So when we see type C, we're thinking automatically 12 feet. We're not thinking 35 feet or 40 feet. And I think what Alice, you're maybe proposing is 35 feet to the parking space versus 40 feet. So the line that you see here, so this line here is roughly 12 plus 8, probably 20 feet away. This line here, if the parking lot started here, would add about 19 feet to that. And I think what I hear is Oz maybe asking, can we split the difference and have it be more like in this area, which I think these parking stalls are 9 feet wide each. So 2 parking stalls and width is 18 feet. Whereas if you took a full 20 feet, that might affect a third row of parking. And so here, what I think I hear him asking for is that's 35 feet till you start it. We're saying 40. I'm thinking, can we split the difference again? And the intent is only losing 2 rows of parking. So then you're probably closer to 38 feet. So they lose 2 rows of parking. I don't know if that meets your intent.
And losing 2 rows mean 2 spaces from each row of parking, which is still an impact to what we're trying to achieve here to get the number of parking we need to continue with this development. Also, another point is the houses to the north or to the west of the parking lot will sit up high, so they will be a little bit, probably a couple feet. I'm counting 6 or 7 feet higher than the parking lot, so the amount of light they're gonna see is probably very minimal or none on the property line after we look at the elevation difference between the 2 areas. So we feel as a design team 30 feet is sufficient to make this a good design that would work for everybody. Thank you.
Sir, the public hearing is closed. Public hearing is closed. Thank you.
And just to reiterate, whatever the pleasure of the board is, staff will make sure that that it's implemented during the site plan review process. But of course, we will need to make sure that whatever you require as a condition is clear, both for the applicant and for us to administer. So we're at the ready to implement whatever the board wishes.
And there's also the opportunity during the planning commission process for neighbor input, or is that process end here?
It would end here. So obviously, folks are able to continue to communicate with staff during the site plan review process. But as far as land use entitlement, it ends here. The planning commission can, of course, put reasonable conditions on on the site plan review. But as far as the land use entitlement and the public participation process, this is, that is the reason for this hearing today.
Thank you.
I think he just called for the question, even though he's not on the board. It's safe to assume.
Well, I think we haven't heard too many comments about the proposed building. It's more the general impact of the existing facilities, how they're being used. I'm comfortable with that increased buffer as proposed. I trust that the engineers will continue to manage the runoff issues from both this site and the adjoining, and the traffic engineers will deal with the traffic on DeJarnett.
Yeah, I believe that was stated well. The current conditions and trying to get these two to coexist as best we can takes compromise, I guess, on both sides, unfortunately. But want to make sure that we're fair to both parties. So I'd like to see it move forward, make sure we're not making the conditions worse for the people that are directly affected by it, and see the school be able to proceed.
I'm going to see what happens here. So I'm going to make a motion that we approve subject to the setback being moved in this southwest corner, am I right? To an additional 10 feet, I think is what we're speaking of.
So, Mr. Halliburton, would that be 30 feet of separation from the parking lot to the western property line?
Yes, yes. Also include the fence that the planning staff suggested in the old portion of the parking lot on the old portion. And then what else am I missing here?
I think that was...
Okay.
I think that was in the...
All right.
Don't forget the ubiquitous all-staff comments.
Yes, and including all staff comments.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, if you'll call the roll for us.
Mr. Batchelor?
Aye.
Mr. Tips?
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton?
Aye.
Chair Young?
Aye. I appreciate everybody's input. That application's been approved. Of course, got a lot of work to do to get completed, but made it through here. Next item on our agenda, staff reports and other business.
So, Chair Young, it was brought to my attention that in our approval of the minutes, we actually did not complete a roll call, so we probably
Might have
need to
been
go
me.
back and
That was me.
button that up.
Sorry about that. Okay, if you'll call the roll for the minutes.
Mr. Batchelor?
Here.
Mr. Tips?
Here.
Vice Chair Halliburton?
Here and I.
Or here or I, whichever one.
Aye.
Yeah.
I hear.
It's all right.
Chair Young?
Aye on the minutes, yes.
Thank you.
I approve.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
I'm here.
All right, anything else?
Adjourn.
Chair Young, that's all.
All right. Thank you. We'll adjourn. Everybody have a good holiday.